Greetings. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Karen Ingle. I teach human rights law here at the law school, and I co-direct the Rapoport Center for Human Rights and Justice. And I recognize many of you, but not all of you. And some people, this might be your third day at UT, so welcome. And thanks for joining us. It's a real honor to have the guests we have with us today and to be able to present this. This is the Rapoport Center's first event of the year. And it's entitled, as you know, Guantánamo and Beyond, Legacies of Exceptionalism, Discrimination, and Securitization. And the Rapoport Center's research and academics manager, Cooper Christiancy, is going to give introductions of our two speakers. But I just want to say a special thanks to Mansoor Adayfi for joining us from Serbia on Zoom. And we're really looking forward to engaging in conversation with him. And of course, to Fionnuala Ní Aoláin, who is a longtime collaborator and colleague, professor at the University of Minnesota, who's done incredible work in many, many areas, but most recently, especially around counter-terrorism and human rights. We're also fortunate, she's the faculty director of the Minnesota Human Rights Center, the University of Minnesota Human Rights Center. And so they're co-sponsoring this event. And I think some folks might be joining us online. And Mansoor is also affiliated with that center, as you will hear. Thanks for getting here on time and getting your meals. This is great. And I just wanted to say that we will have a fair amount of time for discussion, but also for those of you who don't have class right after this, we will be able to stay around for about 15 minutes for some informal conversation, including with Mansoor. So, but we understand people need to get up and leave and when classes start, so no offense will be taken. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Cooper Christiancy, and who has done incredible work putting this event together. So thank you, Cooper.
Thank you, Karen. It's great to see you all. Thanks so much for joining us here today. My brief today is to keep the introductions brief because you all did not come to listen to me, but come to listen to our wonderful speakers, Mansoor Adayfi and Fionnuala Ní Aoláin. So I'll have the great joy and pleasure and privilege of being able to introduce them to you here today. Mansoor Adayfi is a writer, artist, and advocate, and as well, he is a staunch activist for the Brothers of Guantanamo. He was a detainee at Guantanamo, detained without charges or trial for 14 years, and has used the experience to speak out forcefully against human rights violations and the continuing legacy of the Guantanamo detention camp. His award-winning book is Don't Forget Us Here, Lost and Found at Guantanamo. It was published in 2021, and he has been a prolific writer in these spaces for many years now, writing for The Atlantic, The New York Times, and NPR. One thing that might be especially interesting to all of you here today is that he has spoken out forcefully against the Trump administration's plans to use the Guantánamo Bay naval camp as a site for migrant detention. He is also the Guantanamo project manager at Cage International. And so I truly want to emphasize how privileged and blessed we are to have Mansoor joining us here from Serbia and the opportunity to listen to him here today. And of course, we're also joined by Professor Fionnuala Ní Aoláin, who is I have the official title here, Regents Chair and Robina Professor of Law, Public Policy and Society at Minnesota Law School. She is also Professor of Law at the Queen's University, Belfast. She is truly a champion and titan of human rights spaces, having been a longtime expert on counterterrorism, gender and conflict, emergency, transitional justice, and also maternal and obstetric violence in conflict times. She wrote and edited a collection called Guantánamo and Beyond about a decade ago, and has continued to be an active and forceful champion for issues on this matter. Most importantly, for our purposes of conversation today, she served as the UN Special Rapporteur on counter-terrorism and human rights from 2017 to 2023. And in that capacity, took the first visit by a UN independent expert to Guantanamo as part of a technical visit. So she's going to talk a little bit about that experience for us here today. And I just want to put in a personal note, and speaking from personal experience, that Fionnuala's leadership, tenacity, prolific writing, and engagement on human rights issues were so well regarded among her UN peers, among other independent experts. She truly is, I think, the model of a special rapporteur, of a special procedures mandate holder. And also speaking from experience, she is a phenomenal educator, mentor, colleague, and friend to so many. So I'm so glad to welcome her here today.
Thank you, everyone. It's a particular delight to be at the University of Texas Law School, and it's particularly a delight because I was invited by one of my oldest friends and colleagues, Karen Engel, and we've made good trouble in many ways over many years, so it's nice to be in her hometown. And Cooper was my student at the University of Minnesota and worked with me as a research assistant while I was in the role of the UN Special Rapporteur. So there's a lot of coming together in this moment. I'm actually going to take a brief, before Mansoor and I go into conversation with one another, I'm going to take a brief couple of minutes to talk about the expert visit that I undertook to Guantanamo and to speak a little bit about the substance of the report that I issued. We can share that report with students and faculty or guests who are interested in it. I think it's worth noting that when I took up mandate in 2017, Guantanamo was a long-running sore for the United States. The name Guantanamo, as Mansoor will, I think, speak to at some length, is a place and a name of notoriety. It represents all that is derelict in the treatment of human rights in the United States over the past 2 decades. Over 700 Muslim men and boys were rendered without trial or charge to Guantánamo Bay, Cuba. They were subject to the most egregious human rights violations. All were tortured, all were torn from family and country. None of them had the most fundamental rights that we take for granted in any decent, law-abiding society. One of the things that was true when I became Special Rapporteur was that I noticed almost immediately as I started to sit in on Security Council meetings that often, but not always, had something to do with human rights, that whenever the United States got up to speak about human rights in that chamber or other UN chambers, other states like China and Russia would immediately say one word: Guantanamo. Because you have no authority to speak on human rights when you are engaged in systemic violations of the most fundamental norms. You can't lecture anybody on their human rights standards when you are so crassly undermining the rights of others. And doing so in a way that's persistent, doing so in a way that's been undulating, doing so in a way that in some ways defies defense. So that was true when I came into office in 2017, and I inherited the Guantanamo file in the sense that both of my predecessors had been somewhat active, had spoken as UN Special Rapporteurs do on issues of torture, of rendition, of fair trial, and of the violation of other rights. But one thing that hadn't happened in the 2 decades before was that no UN expert had been given access to the facility. Several of my predecessors had asked. Juan Mendes, the Special Rapporteur on Torture, had sought access to the facility. But essentially the US government position was that they would give them the press tour, but not allow them access to the site in full, nor to interviews with detainees. And for me, as for others, that would just be fundamentally unacceptable. Access by UN special procedures means comportment with the Code of Conduct for Mandate Holders, which gives you access to the entire facility and to those who are detained there. But early on in 2017, I had this madcap idea that maybe you could persuade a US government that was being increasingly embarrassed by Guantanamo, not least because that government was trying to talk about Xinjiang, China, spot the gap, right? And that there might be some interest for them in allowing a special procedures mandate holder. And so early in the first Trump term, I went to Washington and started what would be a sort of 6-year pilgrimage to DC to try to continue to persuade the US government that they should enable access. And the key point that I was making was that the principle of access needed to be redeemed. It wasn't about undoing torture, and it certainly wasn't about improving the lives of those, and Mansoor will speak to this, who had been so profoundly harmed. But it was about saying there is nowhere on earth that is simply no go, especially for a democracy in terms of access and review, a prison site. So, and that conversation, which we can talk about in the Q&A, was long and arduous, but ultimately resulted in an agreement in 2023 that I would, with my team, visit the detention facility. I should say there were 3 aspects to the visit, and all of them are important and all of them are equally, in some ways, weighted. One was, of course, access to the detention facility and those who'd been detained. Second, and this is how Mansoor and I came to know one another, was that the lives and the experience of the men who had been in Guantánamo but had been subsequently returned to their home countries or other countries also deserve legal respect and recognition. And Mansoor, as you'll find out, is the go-to person. He was my entry point, my trust builder, the person who put trust in me with his friendship and his belief that I and my team would be reliable and would vindicate the rights of those who really had had so little attention. And so the former detainees in their multiple countries were a big piece of this visit. And the third leg of the visit was actually the 9/11 families and the victims of terrorism. As my report states clearly, the 9/11 event was a crime against humanity. The cost to families immeasurable. And while a huge amount of deference and rhetorical sort of respect is given to the 9/11 families, in practice, many of those families suffer enormous challenge and legal indignities to this day. Many are not legally protected. So my view, as was the longstanding view of the mandate, was we also had an obligation. The US has an obligation to the victims of terrorism to ensure that they are adequately protected by law. And there's an enormous gap between the rhetoric around 9/11 families and the practice of the United States government in relation to the protection of those families. I'm just going to say a couple of things about the report. My team and I were enormously, I suppose, burdened by what it would mean to go to Guantánamo, not least from the fundamental principle of do no harm to others. Think of individuals, and Mansoor can speak to this, who've had so little of their rights redeemed. When someone walks in a blue vest, and this has happened to me in many prisons, sometimes people will think that actually the blue vest is going to get me out of here. But when I visited Guantánamo in February 2023, there were 34 men detained. There's still 15 men in Guantánamo Bay, Cuba. So the blue vest doesn't get people out. It can shed some light on what's happening within. 3 core findings I want to talk about, and then Mansoor and I are going to talk. The first is that Guantánamo remains a place legally defined by arbitrariness. Arbitrariness from the standing orders that are not made public, not even to a special rapporteur, a place in which arbitrariness defines the day-to-day life of every single man who's held there. And that arbitrariness has a direct correlation to the other fundamental finding when we went to Guantánamo at the end of the report, was that the conditions in Guantánamo Bay, Cuba today still meet the threshold of cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment as a matter of international law, and may in individual cases reach the threshold for torture. And that is because of the inadequacy of the healthcare for an aging, post-tortured population who have never had the medical treatment that they deserve or are entitled to as a matter of international law, the lack of contact with their families, the fundamental flaws of legal procedures that deem men to be cleared as a matter of the PRBs, the boards that clear individuals and say they are no longer a security threat to the United States. They are free to go home, except it turns out they are not free to go home because we've passed legislation in Congress that says you cannot return them to the countries that they came from. All of those cumulative factors led to a finding that the ongoing conditions constitute cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment as a matter of international law. The third, I think, major finding is the long-term obligation that the United States owes to torture victim survivors. These are the men who were released, sent back to countries of origin or third countries. None of those men have had torture rehabilitation. None of those men have had access to remedy. None of those men have had an apology for what was done to them. And many of them today live with the stigma of having been in Guantánamo Bay, Cuba, in a way that makes the most simple things impossible. Crossing a border, meeting your family member, being able to get a job or a driver's license, or even in a third country, being able to have legal status in that country. So the United States owes a long-term obligation to those victims of torture. And the one thing I'll close by saying is that human rights activists, lawyers, we have long memories. And long memories are actually the sort of the tool in some ways that helps us the most, because we don't forget. As Mansoor's book says, don't forget us here. People don't forget Guantánamo. Countries around the world don't forget Guantánamo. And those who were sent there certainly don't forget it. So with that, I'm going to turn to my friend Mansoor, if he's still there.
He sent a chat he would be back in 6 minutes.
Oh.
About 2 minutes ago, so.
Right, so I'm
4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay. Maybe just to say a couple of other things about the day-to-day experiences of the men we met. And that might be, I think, of particular interest to you all. So I've met with prisoners in multiple countries in my role as Special Rapporteur. And more or less always, these are high security prisoners in high security prisons. But I have a very simple rule, which is that when we meet individuals, they come in, I generally would have security with me. But there's a core rule, is that that person is never shackled. I don't interview people who are shackled. I want that person to feel, no matter what crime they may have committed or are alleged to have committed, that they are free and safe to talk about what has happened to them or what their experience is. And one of the challenges we had with the U.S. government was that it insisted that all of these men be shackled. And these included men who were cleared, men whom their PRB board had said had committed no crime, were not a threat to the United States, and could be sent home. And so that simple thing of walking into a room where the man that you're meeting is shackled to the ground and can't get up to greet you, again spoke to a culture of treatment towards the individuals that we were meeting. And I said to the government when we were negotiating, I said, you know, the thing is, it's going to go in the report. Like, I'm telling you now, I'm going to put it in the report. And I don't know whose safety you're trying to protect in this. Why this sort of, and again, I think here the argument was about communicating to the men and to me something about them. The second thing that I think was really distressing, and Mansoor might also talk to this, is that every man who came to Guantánamo was given a number. And you see Mansoor has 441 on the, so if you look at the slide, it's got his name. 441 was Mansoor's number at Guantánamo. And you know, we have terrible antecedents historically for people being given numbers, right? We understand what it means to dehumanize a person so much that you don't recognize their name, but you give them a number. In some cases, people have tattooed numbers on people's bodies. So at Guantánamo Bay, Cuba, no man is ever called by his name. He's called by his number. And for the men who've been there over 2 decades, they call each other by their numbers. So what does that tell us about a place in which the most fundamental thing about a person's humanity, their name, is lost and replaced by an arbitrary number given to them when they were being taken violently and pulled into a detention facility? So this sort of culture of, of inhumanity essentially permeates. And I'll close by saying, Mansoor, then I'm going to ask you a question. I think one of the challenges when we went was to say, well, is Guantanamo like it was when Mansoor was brought there? And of course, when I visited, on the one hand, this is actually a pretty good prison. I have visited terrible prisons. I've visited prisons with leaky roofs, with rotting food, with open sewerage, with really, really grim physical infrastructure. So in that sense, no, Guantanamo is not the worst prison I've ever visited. But the point is, it's the worst prison in the sense of the fundamental arbitrary. I have never encountered anywhere in the world a place as arbitrary as Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And all of the pristine infrastructure doesn't hide the arbitrariness. So Mansoor, that brings me to you. And we're going to have a bit of a conversation. I guess, Mansoor, do you want to say hello first, and then we'll go into Q&A?
Yes, of course. So, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يا هلا مرحبا مرحبا. حياكم الله أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا مليون. First of all, I would like to welcome you all. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you, Fionnuala, and everyone for organizing and inviting me to this event, to this lecture. Honestly, I wish to be there in person. Things are a little different.
I wish you were here too. We need a change of law in the United States to get you here. But
Oh, we need a team for that. We need a big team.
I guess, Mansoor, my question to start us off is to sort of explain to mostly students in the room why you're an advocate and why you remain so committed to justice and truth on Guantanamo. Lots of former detainees have just gone back to life, and you made a different choice. Can you tell us why and what motivates you?
Because I'm the best graduate of Guantanamo. So, first of all, as you know, I was kidnapped, sold to the CIA in prison, tortured, taken to Guantanamo, kicked my ass, whatever it is, a lot. So 15 years of my life without trial charges. And you don't survive in that place without losing part of yourself. And you don't come as a whole if you don't fight back. So advocacy for me is not choice. It is a responsibility. And I believe that if I stay silent, I just let the system to keep doing more harm to others. So I fight for justice because what happened and what is happening is wrong. And I was victimized, but I refuse to play the role of the victim. And I believe that someone who subjected and lived through the injustice should speak out and should lead the voices. When I was released in 2016, there was not a lot of former Guantanamo detainees involved in the case. So in some way, in Guantanamo, I used to be troublemaker, smart troublemaker, Also not by choice. I wasn't the smartest, I wasn't the strongest, I wasn't the whatever, I just a son of the tribe elders. But the way I was raised, by the way I was taught by mom, by tribe code and so on, I just stand for what's right. So I continue to behave the same way I behave. And the Guantanamo didn't like that. I was viewed as a leader, as an instigator, as a troublemaker. And I said, I don't care. I didn't care because what's wrong is wrong. I don't care about the rank. I don't care whatever. That doesn't mean I don't respect people. I do. But with that, I became one of the leaders at Guantanamo. And when I was released from Guantanamo, at that point, Guantanamo has shaped my mindset, has also a big part of my life. I spent almost half of my life at Guantanamo. So also I wanted people to know the truth about Guantanamo, not the sanitized beautiful, sexy narrative about Guantanamo. As George W. Bush said, we give them honey and a chicken, whatsoever. So, and also people need to know the truth and the reality, not the headline. So that people were kidnapped, tortured, abused, and so on. So it was really challenging at the beginning because, you know, there was a huge gap in my life, 15 years. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to start. I need to do something. And also, my last words for my brothers at Guantanamo, I told them, I promise I will never forget you. And Mu'ad just released 7 months ago. And he said, thank you so much, brother. You didn't forget us. You fulfill. I haven't fulfilled the promise, but it warmed my heart. I cried because when someone came out after 23 years and told you, you are the only person who didn't forget us. It is not, honestly, it's not easy for everyone to engage in this kind of work. As soon as you speak out, you become a target. You know, your life will be upside down. I was harassed. My ass was kicked. I was a president. I was Lala. I didn't care. I said, whatever you do, I just hadn't cared. Like, not in a way, in a sense, because I know there is people still trapped behind, and I believe that the people deserve to know the truth about what's going on there. I start little by little, and Alhamdulillah, I managed to do a little of work along with Fionnuala and give a stage with Cage, with other friends, and Claire Daly and Cage and others. So yeah, it is the responsibility. And honestly, what hurt me the most that for years I have been warning people, especially American people, that Guantanamo eventually will come home. And in June, the 1st of June, I cried so much. I felt the pain when I saw the orange clown Trump, Ron DeSantis, and the freak lady, Homeland, the Secretary of Homeland Security, celebrating the opening of alligator Alcatraz. And guess what? Who's behind the idea? Who's modeled alligator Alcatraz? Ron DeSantis, same person who was in Guantanamo in 2006. He was one of the team who actually advised the administration to torture us by force feeding. I was there when I was being force fed, tortured. He was laughing, smiling, and so on. He admitted that. If you go to our campaign and articles in 2023, and now Guantanamo came home, and now they are calling for alligator Alcatraz to be used as a model for another Guantanamos. So that's also now I feel the heavy burden to not just now to fight for Guantanamo, to fight for those who are affected by the idea. Guantanamo has become this idea of abusing the law. It's a lawless place. You know, it is it gives some kind of legitimacy, not, you know, in a way, it can give some kind justification whatsoever. And what happened now with Trump administration, they copied exactly what happened after 9/11, like what the so-called a global war on terror, and they start implementing that on the United States. So, you know, this abuse and injustice and torture, whatever, actually become inward. Now it's implemented in the United States soil. I don't want to go on blah 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 blah. I mean, that's just like in short words.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I just pitched my article from Guantanamo to alligator Alcatraz. I'm waiting for someone to pick it up. It is hard to get published anything these days.
Well, I was going to ask you the one thread in this, but also I really recommend Mansoor's book. I know all the 1Ls have no time to read anything. Maybe the 3Ls have time to read. But one of the reasons I really think Mansoor's book is unique is that it focuses a lot on the human spirit and on resistance. And I think that thread, Mansoor, of resistance is incredibly powerful in how you and other men survived. And I wanted you maybe to speak to the students a bit about the resistance, but also what has always struck me in meeting with the brothers, with you and with other, is actually the enormous humanity of not just yours, but of so many who suffered extreme harm, but whose humanity is undented. And I wondered if you would talk a little bit about that resistance thread, but also just the strategies to survive in Guantanamo.
You know, also resistance wasn't a choice to many of us, but it was a choice at the same time. Many like who didn't take that choice for different reasons, but for me, and if you read the book, I strongly advise you try to read the book. It's called The Red Eyes. We formed small group that we said we need to fight back regardless what we are going to endure. So it was a matter of survival, a matter of not to resist. It means you sentence life to death, not in a sense that dying, but you become just abuse over and over and over again, lost your humanity. And I saw some of the detainees who actually just totally surrendered. They become the damage until today. In 2020, when Trump was when they start sending migrants to Guantanamo, I'm just giving a simple example of how that surrender affected people, and they had a choice to do something. So I said, brothers, I'm writing an article. We are writing a letter from former Guantanamo detainees about the sending migrants to Guantanamo, and we have WhatsApp group chat. As soon I post the message, I get 2 or 3 messages. Why are you still doing this? You're a troublemaker. You will get us in trouble. Wallah, this crazy guy is going to send us to Guantanamo. You have to calm down. La, la, la. I felt so sad because I need these individuals, the same mentality were in Guantanamo and the same mentality, even in the group. They could not, they have not, and I don't think they will be able to escape that prison. Guantanamo chained them forever. So in the prison or in the detention or any kind of injustice situation, remind yourself, you have to fight back, regardless your strength, no matter what, resist in any way, in any shape you can. So it was a matter of survival, but at the same time, as for me and for others, I would take the pain rather seeing others get hurt. It's okay if I get hurt, but seeing someone get hurt, no, that destroys me the most. About the humanity, we're human beings, and we tried years to convince them we are just humans, but they were convinced you are not human. So when we I remember when we just talking to the guards, having conversation. Oh, you are a nice guy. What do you think? No, because the guards also were victims. Some of the guards, none of them, was also victims of system. So when they were sent to Guantanamo, the administration also have their own policy. They used to bring older guards, 30s, late 20s, and those guards, have a little experience, and they start asking questions because what they saw didn't match the government or their superior narrative. So what they used to bring, they start bringing younger guards who is 18, 19, 20. So those guards, sometimes they also spent with us, sometimes they become part of our lives. So for a few months, they was asking questions. These guys are not the monsters you are telling us about them. They asking questions. So they got no more talking to these guys, because the guards started to see us as human beings. So, but also when you feel the pain, when you feel the injustice, you recognize your humanity. You still I don't want to end up like them. You also when someone tries to strip you of who you are, of your identity, you cling to it more and you fight with every ounce in your soul. So, I mean, that also add to it. Alhamdulillah, like as I told you, they sold this notion or this idea to the world. These are the worst, killers, terrorists, whatsoever. The same narrative, the same dehumanization that they are, using now against those migrants. And when you come to these people close, you feel like very human. So when they go through a lot, these people are just like doctors, nurses, engineers, mafias, whatever, all kind of people. So resistance, I mean, the core of the book, it's like resistance. This is how we survive at Guantanamo. Sorry, next
No,
question.
that's so powerful. No, and it is, I think, bodies as resistance. The other thing I will just flag is there's an extraordinary, Mansoor is an artist. There are extraordinary artists at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. There's extraordinary art from extraordinary artists, and art was a way of resistance too. And so resistance takes many forms, even in the most extreme of places. It's sort of maybe it's an affirmation of our humanity. Mansoor, I have a more practical question because we're going to go to student questions in a minute, but because you're now working every day on really life post Guantanamo, I wondered if you could tell us, I mean, both I know from your own experience of not being sent, you didn't go home to Yemen, you went to Serbia, which was not the country of your choice. You distinctly said you didn't want to go to Serbia, and Serbia was where you were sent. But you've lived, and you also now advocate for the men who've gone home or gone to third countries. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what are the most pressing challenges that the brothers face in their day-to-day lives after Guantanamo. If you could just talk a little bit about that.
Fionnuala, one of the most pressing issues that former Guantanamo detainees, like in general, we can say Guantanamo 2.0, or some of the brothers call it Camp 8. Basically, once you leave Guantanamo, you're not free. You think once you're free, no. There's a lot of challenges, difficulties, started with some of the cases where people or some of the former detainees literally died, losing their life because they were denied the basic of medical care. So I was just reading a report today on the group of Yemenis who were deported from Saudi Arabia, and I went through my old research articles and questions to the brothers and I couldn't continue because when I look at my phone, I had messages with those brothers. And it's kind of hard and difficult when you look at your contact and you read the name Salim al-Libi, Lutfi bin Ali, and Yunin Fahd, because we were in Guantanamo and we were after Guantanamo. So when I was writing my article, I went through the chat to see, and it brought a lot of memories. And it's really painful because we tried to help. So one of the cases, Asim al-Khalaqi was, for example, died when he was sent to Kazakhstan, and he had kidney stone. He tried to get medical care, but they refused. They said he was lying. And once they left him he was also put in his room. He wasn't allowed to leave. After 1 month, when he was screaming, yelling, and every single day that neighbors complained about him, they took him to the hospital in the morning. 3 hours later, they said they declared him dead. Anyway, the brothers, they said they might kill him there and so on. So when he died, they refused to send his body home. They refused to let his family to come to attend the funeral. And the Secret Service, the Kazakh Secret Service buried him in the unknown place until that day. This is one of the cases. And the other cases when it comes to other death, but other cases prisoners were actually transferred out of Guantanamo as a resettlement agreement between the United States and the hosting countries like the United Arab Emirates. And they were in prison for 5 years, torture, to the point they said, Wallahi, Guantanamo was compared to what they have seen in the United Arab Emirates prison, they said we would like to go back, stay there. And those men again were sent back to Yemen, where they face another imprisonment and disappearance and so on. Other cases where people have no legal status. Basically, you end up in a country, you live under surveillance, under restrictions. You can't work, you can't have family visit, you can't, people around you would harassed, were interrogated, told to stay away. We still have the cases. For example, 2 cases in Kazakhstan, Yemenis, and now they are facing a threat of deporting back to Yemen. Other cases where some cases were in Saudi Arabia where former detainees sentenced to death. 2 of them, at least, they were released from Guantánamo in 2007, 2009. They still in Saudi Arabia because they say something the Saudi government didn't like, not because they have done something. Saudi Arabia, even if you by accident press the wrong tweet or like the wrong tweet they don't like, you end up losing your head, and that's Saudi Arabia. So they still facing one of them actually facing a death sentence. The stigma after in Guantanamo, that were most detainees tried to hide they were in Guantanamo. They don't want anyone they were in Guantanamo because stigma, it's hard to find a job, hard to get married, hard to have a normal life. Even families, they don't want to do anything with you, not because they don't like it, because the stigma they live in. A lack of support. Once you are released from Guantanamo, there is no rehabilitation, no integration program, no network of support. There was no compensation. There is no healthcare. There is no therapy. There is no stipend that sustain yourself. So in 2021, I finished my bachelor degree, and my thesis was about rehabilitation and reintegration of former Guantanamo detainees into social life and the labor market. Disaster. So my recommendation in the thesis was we should start some kind of program that help the released prisoners. Alhamdulillah, next year in 2022, we started working in a program, and now we have a program called Guantanamo Survivors Fund, established by lawyers and some activists, including myself. And what we do, we raise some fund and we help the released prisoners. Imagine one of the cases, someone spent 23 years sent to Algeria and president sentenced to 3 years. I think Fionnuala, you're familiar with the case.
Yeah. I know.
When he was released, he didn't have shoes or clothing, or his medicine was taken. So we managed to send him some fund from Cage and from Guantanamo Survivors Fund. So there is a lot of cases, that the lack of, this is what life after Guantanamo looks like. One of the cases I interviewed in formal cases in Germany, one of the brothers who was doing really well, his family, citizenship, kids, have a good job. And I said, how do you feel? He said, I'm afraid. I said, why? He said, if people know I was in Guantanamo, my life will turn upside down. So stigma of Guantanamo. So I think I'm the only crazy person, crazy enough in a good way, start fighting back. So it is important. It's really important someone has to carry this responsibility and fight back and tell the real truth and so on. So this kind of the issues people go through. But even now, for example, the case in Oman, people were treated really well, but they didn't have legal status. They have housing, healthcare, they have jobs, families. And one day, after 10 years in Oman, Omani government, they said, okay, we're going to deport you back to Yemen. And it was shot, 28 families, and they all deported to Yemen. And they all struggle in Yemen now. Some of them actually in prison. Some of them actually, they didn't have travel documents. Some of them actually under surveillance and so on. So basically, you're sending people to Yemen, and sending people Yemen is like a death sentence. Anyone, any faction, you become a target by either militia, by other factions, by secret police. and welcome to life after Guantanamo.
So Mansoor, we're gonna go to questions. There's a lot of students, and I think that's a super compelling articulation of the scale of day-to-day and meta challenges. But you can ask Mansoor any question. He will answer most questions. So I'm going to turn it over to Professor Ingham.
Just do it.
Yeah, questions are free though.
Questions are free. Wow, the University of Texas is really quiet. In my Minnesota, the students ask lots of questions of Mansoor. So the Texans can't be outdone by the Minnesotans. Can
Either they ask question, I'm going to ask them question, they have to answer.
Oh, yes, please.
You mentioned like kind of some of the interactions you had with some of the guards and how they especially tended to recruit younger guards, maybe so they wouldn't ask more questions. Can you elaborate on that and kind of how those relationships evolved, especially as you got to know them better and sort of maybe a mutual sympathy it seemed you were kind of hinting at? Can you speak on that, please?
Mansoor, did you hear it? The question?
No, no,
Oh,
it's
the
far away. Can you
question
repeat
was,
it?
A microphone on, yeah.
I was just asking about like the relationship with like especially the younger guards you were interacting with there. And it seemed like as you got to know them better, that maybe there was sort of like a mutual sympathy where they could relate, maybe not relate, but they could sympathize with your plight, and then maybe you kind of understood they were sort of in some ways in a difficult situation as well. Could you speak on that too, please?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, as I was a boy when I arrived there, and I have seen Guantanamo changing, evolving, changing people at the same time. So, you know, at the beginning, I remember there was a priest. When he came to Guantanamo, they were tough. Then a few months later, he became like, treated us nicely. And I remember the day he left Guantanamo, he came to the brothers, he was crying, and he said, I will never forget you of my prayers. So for the younger guards, you know, the moment they arrive there, they're full of enthusiastic, they want to do something, and they don't think. When I become like older now in my late 20s, when I look at them, I see them as, I look into them, I look as younger brothers and sisters. And I was like, guys, you know, do not do this. You have to get out of the military. I said that because I remember some of the guards when they arrived, some of the guards, they used to be very bad, you know, like racist, you know, hated us. They were deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan over and over again. When they come back, they become totally broken people, totally, you know, devastated. And when they come, we have, you know, fighting in the past. And I said, guys, please, we don't want. Like, what's going on there? So some of the guards, you know, the administration also will tell the guards not to talk to us, not to trust us. You know, don't talk to these guys. They are liars. They try to manipulate you. They try to get inside your head. One of the funny stories, one of the senior medical officer is called Smo. He was a nice guy, and I was talking to him. He's like, he used to say, I can't talk to you longer, or become friends later on. He said they warned him. They said, 441 has a way of convincing people, be careful. I said, but I haven't convinced you, want to release me. So I saw some of the guards, you know, change a lot. Some of them actually demoted. Some of them actually kicked off Guantanamo because they refused to follow orders. Some of them actually, some of them convert to Islam, believe it or not. There's several stories. There are also a story, one of the female guards fell in love with one of the detainees. You know, it is a human stage. So you can tell someone whatever you can tell them, but at the same time, they are human being. They have their own thought, their own decision, their own judgment. They talk to the people. They can tell who is bad, who's good, who's criminal, who's not. Because when you live with someone 12 hours every day, or most of the week of your life, watching them eating, drinking, sleeping, fighting, crying, whatever, I guess you become part of them. You become part of their life, and they become yours. So that's influence or open the eye of those guards. And I still in touch some of them until today, you know. And some of them actually, but they cannot be public for stigma, and they they also afraid of the government retaliation. But what I can tell you that we were not the only victims. Those guards, or some of them, were also victims of Guantanamo.
Mansoor, one thing I was going to say, and I would also talk about the relationship between the 9/11 families and the detainees, which is to say that one of the costs, and it's certainly something my UN report stressed, was the costs of torture were absolutely were felt and experienced and lived with by detainees. But the 9/11 families, the idea that you will ever have a trial for these harms, the minute you torture in a democratic society, you have lost that privilege. So the harm of torture was also directly inflicted on the families. So again, this is one of the fundamental, I think, kind of spaces we have to close, is that if you think you were doing this for the victims of torture, if that is what you use to justify the use of torture, you actually ensure that those victims of terrorism will never have a day's justice. So again, closing that rhetorical and practical gap is super important. We have time for a few more questions. Yeah, right here.
Hello, I had a question for Mansoor, if you're still there, about, I guess, your development as an artist, and if you were involved in art before being detained, or kind of how that came to be, and how it has specifically helped in like your healing in terms of your coming out of this experience, what it gave you.
So we'll take one or two more questions, because I know students will have to leave for class. That's one. There were some other hands I saw. Yeah, here and here. We'll take 3 questions. So
okay, so
Mansoor, if you hold, I'm going to take 3 questions together so we don't run out of time.
Okay, the first one about art. Okay, second one.
Second one.
I just wanted to ask about, I understand that the process of getting you out of Guantánamo Bay must have been a long and arduous one. I just wanted to wonder what it was like for you to be on the inside, and now that you're been released, I'm sure people are working on the people still in prison, how it's like to be on the other side of the process now.
Mansoor has the best lawyer in the United States. I just want to say she's a superstar. We should talk about her.
She's a badass, guys.
She's a superstar. Okay, yes, go.
Assalamu alaikum. For you, so I've been reading your book a little bit, and so I was curious if there's anything that that wasn't published in the book that you, like, in retrospect, wish that you included.
What did you leave out? Mansoor, you have inside and outside, and you have what did you leave out of the book? Maybe that's
okay. So start about art. Art from Guantanamo is a beautiful story, and inshallah, I have a draft of the book just about art, just that you know. But at the beginning, we weren't allowed to do anything, nothing. Like the first time we get art in 2010, but art, it was really important, which helped us to survive and connect us to ourselves, to our memories, to our previous life. Because once we are being kept or detained on prison, tortured, strategic confinement for years and years, you sometimes just wish to look at the blue, beautiful sky. You see the sun, see the stars. So once the first time when we get our access to art classes, we start painting the things we missed most. And it was a way to escape of the feeling being in prison, to have control, to have some agency. But also it brings a lot of memories, because if I go like, there's a lot of talk about that, but let you know, we consider art, one of us, a living being, yes, because art face the same fate we went through. Some of the arts were detained, sentenced to death, like were destroyed, and still imprisoned there. So it was really important as to get a voice out and to have some so it was a therapy for some of the brothers too, and some of us, a way to communicate, a way of, to protest, to resist, and so on. A second question about how actually they dragged me from my leg. I had no choice. But the process of getting you out, especially as Yemenis, because as you know, the Congress in 2009 banned from releasing detainees to Somalia, to Yemen, to Afghanistan. So even if you are cleared for release, that doesn't mean they can release you. Some of the detainees still in Guantanamo have been cleared for release since 2009. They're still there. So once you are released, there's no authority. There is no structure in place to release you. When the government decides to release, they will release you. So when Obama Obama signed an executive order to close Guantanamo, but twice he promised but failed. So once he knew that he wouldn't be able to close Guantanamo, he tried to release as many detainees as he could. So in my case, you have no choice. Speak English, open-minded. There is no link to terrorism whatsoever. I was sold to the CIA to be Al-Qaeda commander, not an insider. Imagine that, general. After 15 years, they said, no. I'm cleared. If he actually joined Al-Qaeda, he's not. It was a mistake. And they just go there. I said, no, you cannot take my rank. So basically, they dragged me against my will. Basically, they brought you against your will. They released you against your will because Guantanamo was a stage to promote the government narrative. The government justified the torture, the abuse, the invasions, and whatever, and the torture. As for the book, the book, the publishing world is crazy. Because the original draft, I have around 500,000 words. I wrote in Guantanamo as legal letters. The story of the book, I started writing in 2010. The FBI confiscated my first draft in 2013. Then when I met my Aunt Beth, so I told her, I wrote, can you get my draft? She said, no, they won't give it to me. So I started writing to her as legal letters. Dear lawyer. So I started writing every single day. Like all day, I would get chained, shackled, only one hand, keep writing. So she collected all the letters and get them approved. I was lucky before Trump took the office, alhamdulillah. Then when I start working on the book with Antonio, and I can tell you I tortured him a lot. So we published, anyone read the draft, they said that should be 2 books. So what we left, we published only maybe 50% of what we won't say. But when you send your draft to the publishers, no. They said originally we want only 80,000 words. We said no, that's not. They said no. So we fought with them back and forth. We ended up publishing 120,000 words. Now I have a new book, Life at Guantanamo. We sent the first book proposal, the second, no, the market, we need to shape the story in that way. And sometimes you have to compromise. There's a lot with the story, but they don't care about the story. They care about the profit from your story. So welcome to the publishing world.
Well, one thing I will say, there's several books that I do recommend. Mansoor's book, Don't Forget Us Here.
2 books, Fionnuala, 2
yes,
books.
I know. Well, I was going to talk about this. I'm giving you a promotion. I'm like promoting the second book, which is an audio book on letters from Guantanamo. And it's a super read. It won a great prize as best audiobook last year. Super great book. And then there's the forthcoming book. But I would also, maybe I'm going to make a plea, but then Mansoor may also want to make a plea. There are still 15 men left at Guantanamo. This place is not closed. There are 2 men who've been cleared for transfer, one of them, as Mansoor said, is back in 2009, who still remain there, not a threat to the United States, not charged with any crime. And we have 3 forever prisoners, 3 people who have never been before a PRB, have never had any legal process. And the idea that a democracy holds people without any form of legal process indefinitely is simply inconsistent with any meaningful definition of a democracy. Those 2 things are absolutely in opposition. And Mansoor is completely right that this lawlessness has created the opportunity for further lawlessness in the United States, for further securitization, for further lack of process. And so Guantanamo is like an original sin. And unless we address the legacies of Guantanamo, you can't unwrap what we have now without unwrapping what was there. So I'll give the final word. You have 2 minutes, Mansoor, to make a call or a plea or to remind people about what you think is most important about Guantánamo right now.
Well, first of all, we should fight this injustice, especially now in the United States. My fear is that tomorrow they are going to use it to target American citizens. They already did, but anyone who dare to speak or protest or speak against the government policies whatsoever, they give the same policy, the same justification. So we need to demand the closure of Guantanamo and demand the closure of alligator Alcatraz, and demand accountability. Because without accountability, there is no guarantee things will happen again, and it's happening. And they pushing a lot of money, a lot of policies and legislation to create this kind of places. So no matter, your voice matter. Please, guys, don't stay silent. Resist.
Karen is gonna close us out.
Yeah, thank you.
So very much, Mansoor, Fionnuala, all of you came, and it wasn't just students, so everybody, we're all students here in a way, but we also had a number of faculty, a number of people from the community. We're so glad you joined us. Please come back to other events. And I don't know I think folks can certainly come up and if they want to continue.